When first seeing any game, the first thing you'll probably notice about it is its art style. Whether it completely captivates you with its art or fills you with a visceral feeling of disgust, it forms a lot of your first impression of a game. In this vein, I was completely captivated when I saw the uniquely grotesque and amazing art of Blasphemous. Better yet, I found out that it was all wrapped around a deep world destroyed by a greater force. Blasphemous begins in the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. Within a pile of corpses awakens the Penitent One, the player character, wielding the mea culpa. After defeating the first boss, we meet Deogracias, who instructs us that we need to seek out His Holiness Escobar and take his place at the top. However, a giant door stands in our way, which requires us to collect 3 humiliations. 3 humiliations, 3 bosses, and then we're off. There's a lot more to the story and lore, but I'll wait until we have some more context to explain more. For now, the Penitent One reaches the town of Albaro. Here there are a bunch of people, but most of them aren't really in great shape, which you'll notice is a theme throughout this game. No one is really thriving, but you'll see more later. The 3 humiliations are the main goal right now, but we can really explore whatever we want. Blasphemous primarily follows the structure of a Metroidvania. If you're not familiar, as a combination of Metroid and Castlevania, these sorts of games are usually big, interconnected maps where you unlock new areas by getting new items and abilities. The world of Svistodia in Blasphemous is definitely interconnected, but your progression through it is a little bit different than other Metroidvanias. Instead of acquiring new movement abilities, you instead collect relics that allow you to interact with the environment in new ways. For example, if you hand at least one medicinal herb to Tirso and Albaro, he'll give you an item that can then be exchanged for the Shroud of Dreamt Sins, which allows you to speak to the ghosts of dead bodies. It's not super helpful, but it can be used to receive hints and lore and find other secrets. Most of the relics have more practical uses, but I'll bring them up as they become relevant. From Albaro, you can pursue any of the 3 humiliations in any order, but I'll talk about them in an order that I think makes sense. To the west, we can travel through the Wasteland of Buried Churches and reach the Mercy Dreams, which is the first major dungeon-like area. It's in this stretch of areas that you're forced to engage with the combat of Blasphemous a lot more. In a lot of ways, the combat displays elements of the Souls-like genre. The most obvious of these is with the main source of healing, the Bile Flasks. When used, these recover a portion of the Penitent One's health, and they're refilled every time you rest at a Preview altar, which also serves as checkpoints for when you die. They're basically the bonfires from Dark Souls. You can also find empty Bile Flasks throughout the world, which increases your max amount, as well as upgrade them with Nacimiento, letting them heal more HP with each use. It's a system popularized by the Estus Flasks in Dark Souls, and I think that's for a good reason. In a lot of games with healing items, especially RPGs, you end up stockpiling items instead of using them with the mindset of, what if I need it later, and it causes you to not use them at all when they're needed for a fight. However, with Estus and Bile Flasks and similar systems, you can put all your resources into every life, since your healing will still refill when you die. Near the end of the Wasteland of Buried Churches, you encounter this enemy, which is the first one that really forces you to become acquainted with parrying. If you guard right before an attack connects, you'll break their stance and counterattack, another staple of Souls-like games. The parry in Blasphemous is incredibly satisfying, and since it works against most physical attacks, it adds a lot to most combat encounters. A lot of Souls-likes kind of fall into the pit of parries only being helpful against humanoid enemies, unless it's a game that's entirely built around it like Sekiro, but I think it works really well within Blasphemous. These areas prepare you for the first real test of your abilities, the boss guarding the first humiliation, the Ten Piedad. It's not a super complicated boss, but I think it works really well. All of its attacks have very clear tells, and they're manageable if you get used to them. But if you're not really experienced, or if you're first playing the game, it can still pose a competent challenge. It's also made a lot easier with the use of prayers. These are magic spells that can be cast using Fervor, the blue bar in the top left, and they can be found throughout the world and as rewards for side quests and such. I'll talk more about them later, but I thought they were important to at least mention right now. After the boss is defeated, we gain the Holy Wound of Attrition. Right before the Ten Piedad fight is the first fast travel warp room. Using these, you can travel back to the Brotherhood of Silent Sorrows and use a key bought in Mercy Dreams to open this door. Behind it is the second relic, the Blood Perpetuated in Sand. These make blood platforms materialize and lets you reach previously inaccessible areas. I know this may seem like a random detour, but I think highlighting the relics is important for something I want to talk about later. Beyond the first humiliation room is a passageway to the Desecrated Cistern. This is a massive sewer system filled with poison clouds and sewage water, but it's also served as a bridge between several areas in the first half of the game. It also has this arcade machine that lets you play a reference to the classic Castlevania games, which is pretty cool as well, but it doesn't really feed into any other part of the game. This passage leads us back to Alborough, which is nice, but if we keep going we'll reach the Mountains of Endless Dusk. There are some annoying enemies here, but the area is not very long. There's a little boss with this woman, Perpetua, but we don't get much context and she'll be a lot more relevant later. You get to this huge chasm with some important things on the other side, but the lift is off right now. Below is Yondo, a massive overturned bell. Turns out the chasm was just the bottom of the bell, which I think is a super interesting set piece and a really cool idea for an area. There's a few puzzles to be solved, but when we reach the other side of the bell, we can fix the lift and proceed to the lower section of the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. Not only does this serve as a nice little connection, there's also quite a few important things in this area. The most important NPC here is probably Soledad, who allows you to equip more rosary beads if you supply the necessary rope. Throughout Sisvodia are various rosary beads, and when they're equipped they have a variety of effects that benefit the penitent one. This ranges from things like more health and fervor to stronger prayers, to making you completely invincible while using a bile flask. That one is really good and I used it for most of the game. While some are definitely better than others, I think that they're well balanced enough and serve as the main sort of customization system within Blasphemous. After reaching the bottom of Yondo, or I guess the top of the bell, we can get to the Grievance Ascends. This place is an absolute shithole. There's poison clouds everywhere and annoying enemies, but it's a necessary evil since the next humiliation lies at the end. At the very least, the next relic also lies at the top of the area, the Silver Tongue of Dolphos. This makes us completely immune to the poison clouds, both here and in the Desecrated Cistern, which makes traversal at least a little bit easier. Near the bottom of the area is this big black egg. If 3 specific items are offered to it, it will hatch into Altagracias, a character that I don't think I can even show on YouTube. Trust me, it's pretty gross. They give us the Egg of Deformity at the very least, but we won't be able to use it until later. At the end of the Grievance Ascends lies the Tres Angustias, and I think that they're one of the best bosses in the game. The room that you're in constantly rises and the bosses are shooting at you as you try to climb up. It's not super complicated, but the balance of climbing up and attacking is really cool for me. Afterwards, we get the Holy Wound of Contrition, and also find an elevator back to the top of the Desecrated Cistern. If we take the Egg of Deformity to this tree where we fought Perpetua, we receive an item that is exchangeable for our next relic, the 3 Gnarled Tongues. The reason I've put so much emphasis on when relics are obtained has now become a little bit more relevant. We now have 4 relics, all of which help with traversal and finding secrets, but for some reason only 3 can be equipped at a time. I truly don't understand the point of this restriction. The only point of only being able to equip a set amount of things is that there's up and downs of using any given thing. In a normal game, there's the fast, speedy, low damage weapon or the big, heavy, high damage weapon. But all of the relics are purely beneficial, and all that this does is make you have to needlessly open the menu to switch relics. It's like if you had to open the menu in Super Metroid to switch between the regular and space jump. It really doesn't add anything, it just serves to break the pacing. It's ultimately not a big deal, but it does get annoying after a while, especially considering how much you do have to switch relics. The final humiliation lies at the top of the map, in the Covenant of Our Lady of the Charred Visage. This area can be a little annoying, but once you get used to the enemies, it's not too bad. At the end is the titular Our Lady of the Charred Visage, who gave me a lot of issues on my first playthrough. A floating head with 2 hands is absolutely not an original idea for a boss, but it's a fun enough sort of bullet hell boss. Beyond it lies the final humiliation, the Holy Wound of Compunction, as well as a Mea Culpa altar. Throughout the world are these shrines, and when they're found, they both increase the base attack of the Mea Culpa, but also allow you to buy new abilities with the Tears of Atonement gained from enemies, such as the Charge Attack and Downward Drop. I haven't mentioned them yet, but Tears of Atonements are just souls or runes or blood echoes or whatever is your equivalent for whatever game you're talking about. These new abilities are pretty helpful, but the increased damage is the most important part of finding the altars. I've kind of been finding them for the entire game, but I thought it would be most relevant now that the enemies are getting a bit more complicated and the abilities gained are a lot more useful. With all 3 humiliations, we can finally open the Golden Gate. For a while, a man named Estrus has been following us, and now he wants to stop us from going any further. He's pretty tough and almost requires you to get good with the parry. Near the end, he summons Perpetua, who's actually his sister, but it doesn't take too much more to beat them. After them, nothing else stands in the way of the second half of the game. There's some more bosses here to fight, but it's structured pretty similarly to before, so I'll go through them a little bit quicker. Within the Mother of Mothers is Melchidius. I am not saying that correctly. The exhumed Archbishop. This massive skeleton guy being held up by a bunch of arms. He's normally too high to reach, but attacking the arms brings him down and makes him vulnerable. After the fight, we're rewarded with the deformed mask of Orestes, which we'll need later. In Mother of Mothers, we also meet up with Redento, this old man that we've been helping on his pilgrimage throughout the game. This is mostly breaking down walls and such, but it also involved reactivating the lift over Yondo that I talked about earlier. At the end of this quest, we can enter this cave and get the nail uprooted from dirt. This is one of the less useful relics and feeds more into my issue with only being able to equip 3 relics at a time. It allows you to move through water and the like without it affecting your movement, but it's really only useful for a few collectibles. After leaving the cave, Redento is gone, and upon re-entering it, that's rough, man. Sorry. I mean, at least we get a rosary knot from the end of Redento's quest, although his reward doesn't seem as good as ours. Also in Mother of Mothers is the entrance to all the tears in the sea, where we can meet up with a girl named Miriam. Miriam is actually from an entirely different Metroidvania, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. To help her return to her world, we need to go through a bunch of pretty tough platforming challenges. These are fun enough, and the music is amazing. I really want to put a highlight on this because it's probably my favorite song in the entire OST. It's called Voyage of Promise. Take a quick listen. But it does bring up a problem I have. Movement in this game feels really heavy and can be a bit awkward sometimes. I want to stress that this isn't an issue for almost the entire game, but in stuff like these challenges it doesn't feel like it was built for this kind of high-speed movement. Also, the ladders just have a really weird hitbox and sometimes you just fall into the instant death spikes. Nonetheless, I do enjoy Miriam's challenges, and it's completely optional anyway. There are some other references to other indie games, but Miriam is by far the most interesting, so I felt her pertinent to mention. Next up is the Library of Negated Words. While I love the aesthetic of this area, it's one of my least favorite in terms of gameplay. Literally every enemy in this area is incredibly annoying. There's the annoying boomerang book enemies, these guys take up most of the room when you're trying to get through, and these awful amalgamations of limbs that constantly spawn floating heads that come towards you constantly. The library leads into the sleeping canvases. This area is still pretty dangerous, what with the swinging blades and giant statues, but it feels a lot more fair than the library. It's here that we can find Hosinero inside of a painting. Oh, he's not the cow. He was in the cow. Okay. Anyway, throughout the game are children of moonlight trapped in cages, and after getting about half of them, Hosinero will reward you with the Linen of Golden Thread, the last important relic. There is one more, but all it does is alert you to nearby secrets, so it's not really necessary. The Linen of Golden Thread allows you to fall down certain bottomless pits, and instead of dying, you enter whatever area is below. I hope you can see why I have problems with the relic system. None of these really change the Penitent One's moveset or how he interacts with the world, it just makes some platforms appear or makes you not die from certain hazards. Limiting it to only 3 at a time doesn't make anything any more interesting, just a little more annoying since you have to frequently open the menu to change relics. At the very least, most if not all the relics are optional, but I still think that this system is weaker than the upgrades of other Metroidvanias. To the right of Hosinero is the boss of the Sleeping Canvases. Exposito, Scion of Abjuration, fights you from the background, attacking with this root snake. A lot of the attacks are pretty annoying to deal with, and like any toddler, Exposito can brutally dismember you, instantly killing the Penitent One. It's an alright fight, but it's not really a highlight of the game beyond its kind of cool design. Behind him is another mask, the embossed Mask of Crescente. You're probably starting to notice a pattern between the humiliations in these masks. Above the Mother of Mothers is the Archcathedral rooftops. There's a lift here with 3 statues. We can place our masks in the statue, each of which lets us go up another level. Using both of the previous masks leads us to the Wall of the Holy Prohibitions. It's a bit of a maze prison, requiring getting various keys to progress through to the end. In the final room, it seems to be empty until a sword flies up from the ground, dropping us into the next boss. Kirse, Returned by the Flame, is a super fun boss to learn and fight, and definitely high up on my list of bosses in this game. Defeating Kirsay gets us the key of the High Peaks, unlocking a lift to the area containing the final mask. With the last mask, we can take a lift up to the deambulatory of His Holiness, where Escribar, our goal, is. Before we can get to him, however, we're stopped by Chrysanta of the Rapt Agony. She's a tough one-on-one sword fight, and since this is a Souls-like, it's a recipe for an amazing boss. I would say she's my favorite boss, but, well, you'll see later. After her is finally His Holiness Escribar. After both of his phases have been finished, you'll see one of the endings, which I'll talk about in a second. You're probably wondering what is actually happening up until now. From playing the game normally without really looking into it, it's about as complicated as I've described. Find the humiliations, find the masks, and kill Escribar, but there's a ton more going on here. Like most Souls-likes, a lot of the info about the world is in item descriptions and nuance and character quests, so a lot of it is just found throughout and not really told to you in the main story. Almost everything in Blasphemous is a result of and revolves around the miracle. It's a sort of entity that has incredible power and seemingly a will of its own. It's become the center of worship for people throughout Svistodia. People pray to the miracle, and it definitely does something about it. As you can probably infer up until now, not a lot of people are super happy around here. There's disease and monsters and rotting corpses everywhere. You can pray to the miracle and ask for help, but it's also the fault of the miracle that the world is this bad. It really just does whatever it wants, and it's hard to lay down any real motivation from it, other than wanting people to continue worshipping it. Like we saw earlier, we wake up in a massive pile of corpses within the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. The penitent one was actually brought back from the dead by the miracle in order to complete his penitence. The miracle wants us to replace Escribar as the head of worship of the miracle, and part of his penitence is the journey to Escribar. To do this, we also receive the mea culpa to fight our way there. That's the bare bones of the main story, but there are a ton of smaller stories throughout about the exploits of the miracle. I don't want to go into a ton of these in case you're interested in trying the game, because a lot of them are really interesting, but I'll talk about one. There was a girl named Arya who was so beautiful that people began to worship her. Through fear of being a false idol and facing the wrath of the miracle, she covered her face in burning oil. This, of course, horribly disfigured her face, and in this act of faith, the miracle, quote-unquote, blessed her, making it so that her face would burn forever. This miraculous event caused her to continue being worshipped anyway, and she became Our Lady of the Charred Visage. That's the backstory for one boss, but there's a ton of other stories of people who have encountered the miracle. Most, if not all of them, end in tragedy, not to mention all of the monsters that have stemmed from the miracle that don't have their own stories. There are several endings that can be achieved in Blasphemous, ending A, B, and C. I'm gonna go through these in a weird order, but it makes the most sense. Ending B is gotten purely through defeating Escribar at the end of the game. The penitent one attempts to commune with the miracle, but is deemed unworthy and dies before he can. Ending A requires us to do a few things first. The Immaculate Bead Rosary seemingly has no purpose or use, however, if you die a few times with it equipped, it transforms into the Weight of True Guilt. This allows you to destroy these confessor statues littered throughout the land, which opens up several combat challenges. These aren't super fun, to be honest. I don't like them that much, but completing each one makes the thorn given by Dea Gracias grow, until it's the Sphisphodia of Sin. Doing this, and then defeating Escribar, unlocks ending A. In this ending, the penitent one is deemed worthy and communes with the miracle successfully. He stabs himself with the mea culpa and transforms into a twisted tree, replacing Escribar as a holy symbol of the miracle. It's a little bit better than ending A, but still not exactly happy. But that's where ending C comes in. Unlike the other two, this ending was actually added with the final DLC, The Wounds of Eventide. Before fighting Estrus at the Bridge of High Cavalries, we can enter the Echoes of Salt, a new area to this DLC. Within is the grave to Perpetua, who asks us not to kill Estrus. After viewing this scene, Perpetua stops Estrus from fighting, and he tells us to meet him above the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. Upon doing so, he gives us a key grown from twisted woods. After helping Diosdado in the Library of Negated Words, he reveals a door that can be opened with the wooden key. Inside is the Holy Visage, who requests us return his eyes to him. These eyes are gotten by fighting two new bosses. The first boss can be accessed through giving enough bones to the ossuary under Albero. These bones are found as collectibles throughout the game, and for the most part just give Tears of Atonement. However, after getting enough of them, a door in the back will open. Behind it is Isadora, Voice of the Dead. This boss is awesome, but also incredibly difficult to beat. As a little anecdote, some of you may be familiar with Pyrocynical's 8-hour video on the show Utopia that came out a couple years ago. On my first playthrough of Blasphemous, I watched the entire video between attempting Isadora and beating Miriam's platforming challenges alone. So yeah, she's pretty difficult, but still really fun. Killing her gives us the severed right eye of the traitor. The second boss lies at the end of Mourning and Havoc, another new area to the DLC. I'm gonna be straight up with you, Mourning and Havoc sucks ass and is by far the worst area in the game. All of the enemies are annoying, there's mud that slows you down unless you have the nail uprooted from dirt, and all of the hazards get in the way so much. It's not the sort of satisfying challenge that the rest of the game gives, it's just frustrating and terrible. Thankfully, the boss at the end is incredibly worth it. Serpius is a massive snake where the penitent one fights him on top of him. The scale is awesome, and he's still pretty tough, though not nearly as hard as Isadora in my opinion. It feels like a cool Shadow of the Colossus fight, and it's a real standout out of the cast of bosses. After killing Serpius, we receive the severed left eye of the traitor. Upon returning both eyes to him, the Holy Visage gives us the apodictic heart of the Mea Culpa. I haven't mentioned them up until now, but Mea Culpa hearts can be found throughout the game and give some risk-reward effects to you. They aren't really important, but they do give a little more options for customization. With the apodictic heart equipped, we can fight Chrysanta, but after you beat her, she enters a much faster and harder hitting phase. This is my favorite boss in the game, now with the second awesome phase added. After beating her again, we break Chrysanta's chains of faith, literally, and we can meet her where we met Estrus before, above the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow. She gives us the fourth, final humiliation, the Holy Wound of Abnegation. With this, and the Sphistodia of Sin from ending A, we can challenge Escobar again. Now there's a third, quite frankly very easy, phase where we fight him alongside Chrysanta, but it's still really cool. After finally killing Escobar, we can meet up with the High Wills. The Holy Visage used to be one of them, but was cast out, hence the whole traitor moniker. The High Wills are the ones that created the miracle and are essentially behind everything. They're obviously very angry at us for defying them, but the penitent one and Chrysanta don't really care. After the High Wills berate us, we destroy them alongside Chrysanta, and it's really awesome and a cool, bloody scene. With the High Wills gone, so is the miracle, and along with it, the effects of the miracle. This means that the Mea Culpa created by them crumbles, and since we're brought back by the miracle in the first place, the penitent one dies. Chrysanta and Diagracias lay us to rest, and then credits. There's a little teaser for Blasphemous 2, but that's a story for another day. It's a bittersweet ending, but at least the miracle can't hurt anyone anymore, and I think it's a nice conclusion to the game. That's Blasphemous. It's an incredible game with amazing bosses and fun areas, even if I do have a few problems with it. The rest of the game is great, but I haven't really talked about what makes this game truly special for me, and you've been looking at it the entire video. The art style and aesthetic of Blasphemous is really what sets it apart, and it's amazing throughout the entirety of its runtime. It's absolutely grotesque, but there's a sort of beauty in that for me. It is incredibly inspired by certain parts of Christianity, all the gross and distorted enemies, the really well-designed bosses. It all comes together to make Sphistodia an incredibly immersive and well-realized world. I honestly have trouble describing how good everything looks. It's obviously not a style everyone is going to be into, what with all the blood and gore, but like a lot of the niche things I like, for the audience that it hits hard. Finally, I wanted to mention the clear inspiration that Blasphemous takes from Berserk by Kentaro Miura. You've probably at least heard of Berserk. If you haven't, it's probably one of the best written pieces of fiction ever. It has the same sort of grotesque world, and Blasphemous takes a lot of design cues from it. I mean, the symbol associated with the miracle is literally just the brand of sacrifice from Berserk. If this inspiration wasn't evident enough, we can look into something else added within the Wounds of Eventide DLC. Right before the Holy Visage, we can find a rosary bead, the Crimson Heart of Miura. Of course, it's named after Kentaro Miura, and is the exact image of a crimson behelit. The item description reads, "A strange artifact, said to be found within the corpse of the fiercest of bulls. Also called the Egg of the Sovereign, the twisted features of its surface stir under the torment of its wearer, increasing attack speed when their health is low. A glint catches in its clouded eyes, the reflection of an eclipse of a foreign invisible sun. A permanent mark caused by a masterpiece that transcends all and any borders. Thank you for everything, Master. Miura unfortunately passed away in May of 2021 of an acute aortic dissection, a few months before the DLC was released. This had a huge impact on a lot of people, and even for someone like me that only read Berserk after his death, it still hits really hard knowing that someone that supplied this amazing, beautiful piece of media is no longer with us. I just love that he was able to be immortalized in some way in this game that he so greatly inspired, so I wanted to draw attention to it. Blasphemous is an amazing game, and I'd recommend it to anyone that likes Metroidvania or its sort of style. It's so elevated by its art, not really in a style over substance way, but instead gaining more substance from its style. As I briefly mentioned earlier, Blasphemous does have a sequel that released last year, so if you've watched this far and enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments and I'll probably cover that one too. Like and subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff. If you hated the video, let me know in the comments, maybe I can improve. Thanks for watching. Alright, end slate time. Blasphemous is really cool to me, and is linked to why I love Berserk so much. I love this style, and I hope that it appeals to some of you as well, and maybe this convinced you to give it a try at some point. I did spoil a lot of the game, but, you know, whatever. This video was really fun to make, and I really want to cover a lot more Metroidvanias, because that's like my second favorite genre ever, and the other one is RPGs, which, oh my god, that'll take a lot more of an investment to get done. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.